everyone, Britta Albert here. If this is your first time here, I am a transformational life coach, and my goal for this channel is to help you overcome the obstacles that are standing in the way of you living your best and most authentic life. In today's video, I am going to tell you guys a story that is actually going to be a pretty long story, so this video will most likely be in 2, possibly even 3 parts. This video is my story about supernatural encounters. So if you are curious or if you have your own experiences, sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and come along for the ride. Now, the way that I'm going to tell you this story is I'm going to tell it to you in the actual chronological order, not in the way that I remember things. As I continue to learn and continue to understand and continue to have new experiences, things from my past have a tendency of making more sense, or I might remember something that has either been buried or that I just completely forgot was there because it didn't seem abnormal to me at the time. So the way I'm going to present this story is the true order of things, not my memory of things, if that makes sense. So I'll try to kind of keep that up as I go and explain why my beliefs at this time were different than my beliefs at this time, because my experiences change a lot. So my earliest memories when I was young, I remember still being in my crib. So I was walking age, I'm guessing maybe 2-ish, somewhere in there. I remember climbing out of my crib and everyone was asleep. And I remember playing hide and go seek with angels. I don't know why I considered them angels. I think it was just the vocabulary that I learned from my family going to church and things like that. But I do have vivid memories of playing hide and go seek with angels. And what they would do is they would make little noises and I would follow where the noises were. I never got to hide. I was always the seeker. And I would go until I found them. And how do I know that I found them? There would be little flashes of light. Almost like if you saw the movie Pinocchio when you were a kid, the animated version, the blue fairy, when she comes in and she's looks like a star kind of shining in the sky, and she comes in and she's like this blue glowing orb. That was what I experienced as the angels when I was very little. My next memory that I have when I was a kid is being afraid of Dracula. Now, a lot of kids, and you can probably attest to your own experiences, they're either afraid of the dark, or they're afraid of monsters under their bed, or they're afraid of monsters in the closet, or they're afraid of a boogeyman, or whatever different things that kids make up in their mind or tell each other about or see on TV. So for me to be afraid of Dracula is a little strange, mainly because my mom, for one, didn't even like scary movies. So it's not like I saw Dracula, the movie, and became afraid of the character. I got my idea of Dracula from Sesame Street and from the Count Chocula cereal. This really tall, and I think just Halloween in general, seeing marketing and things like that, I just knew kind of the cartoon idea of who Dracula was. This really tall, super slender figure with a long black cloak, and that was Dracula. So I was afraid of Dracula because every night my mom would come and say prayers over me as I was going to sleep. Now, if you understand what prayer is, it is more than just a religious chanting. Whether you are religious or not, prayer is power. Prayer is intent. So when my mother was coming into my room and she was praying protection over me at night, she was not only giving me a feeling of safety and security and peace and joy, but she was also protecting me from other things that she didn't even know about. Her intent of love over me while I slept with protection literally kept lower density at the time you would call it evil, but we'll get into that later, kept lower density entities from coming into my room. So I was afraid of Dracula because that was the closest thing that I could explain with my vocabulary what I experienced on a nightly basis. I saw a very, very, very tall, probably, I don't know how tall our ceilings were when I was a kid, but I know that it was taller than the door frame, but not as tall as the ceiling. So I'm gonna say it was probably a good 7 feet, maybe a little bit taller. Black mass, long, very, very thin black mass. And this long, thin black mass would pace my doorway every night, just pace back and forth. Growing up, well, after a certain point, I actually forgot about that memory until things later down the road brought up that memory. But in between, when I was wondering what that was, and I was a little bit older to start to think about it, I tried to console myself by saying, well, maybe I just didn't know what it was, and it looked scary because it was a dark entity. Maybe it really wasn't bad, but good and bad are relative, so we're not really going to use those words, but just for the sheer fact of explaining, when I say low density and high density, that you can think of in your mind as low density evil, high density good. They're not really the same thing at all, but just for the sheer fact of simplicity, when I talk about lower density, you can think of it as demonic or evil. High density would be angelic or good, light, love, things like that. So every night, I laugh now. When I was a kid, I was terrified. So every night, this tall black mass paced by my door. I could feel its intent, and its intent was not death. It didn't want to kill me, but it did want to scare me. Its intent was chaos. Its intent was fear-inducing because it fed off of that fear energy. So it wanted me to be afraid of it. It wanted me to think that it would hurt me, and it may have actually had the ability to hurt me. I don't know. I never did experience that, thank goodness. So at this point, I was a little bit older than when I was playing hide and go seek with the angels, because I was in a regular big girl bed at this point. So I remember throwing my blankets over my head and having my head actually underneath the pillow. So I would sleep like this with my head underneath the pillow and the covers over the top of my head. And that was how I fell asleep each night, because in my mind, if it couldn't see me, then it wouldn't know where I was, because in my childlike mind, I was flat and it couldn't tell that something was in the bed. I don't know. That's why I laugh though, because I find that memory funny. But the next thing that happened was really cool. I am probably about another year older at this point, and I gained a friend. And you could call it an imaginary friend if you want to. It's so esoteric, it's difficult to describe, because this friend was never dense like you and I. This friend was like sacred geometry, sentient sacred geometry. And if you know anything about sacred geometry, I hope that this perks your ears, because this is something that is still with me today. And this is probably my most loved, beloved, cherished memory and experience. At some point when my parents were fighting, a sacred geometric entity came to me. It did not have a name. I didn't ask for a name. It didn't tell me its name. I'm assuming it doesn't have a name, because where it exists, there's no need for a name. I knew that it loved me. It didn't come to protect me. It came to teach me how to protect myself, and it stayed with me. I once drew a picture of it, and I'll see if I can find that picture, and then I'll put it on the screen as I'm describing this, if I can find the picture. As I said, it's extremely esoteric, so it's very, very difficult to describe this entity. It was about the size of a quarter, maybe a half dollar, silver dollar, half dollar. If you're familiar with a pop socket, it's very similar to the size of the diameter of a pop socket. So this entity is black and white checkered, and it vibrated violently in an up and downward motion. And it communicated telepathically, not with words, just knowingness. So it came to me one night when I was afraid. And yes, I could still throw the covers over my head, but this thing showed me how to create a force field over myself. And it was a literal bubble that covered me, and it could be really close to me or it could be really far away from me. And the farther it was, the safer I felt, because nothing that was bad could cross through my force field. So the bigger my force field, the further from me I could keep whatever was there, seen or unseen. And the force field I could actually see with my eyes. This is another thing that's very difficult to describe, so bear with me. The best way that I can describe it is if you have ever seen white noise, where say it's the static on TVs that they used to have when it was a station late at night and there was no programs playing. It was not as dense as white noise, that kind of snow effect on the TV. So imagine having a screen of white noise in front of you, but it's a little bit more spread out. So it's not quite sparkling, but there's particles everywhere and you can see through on the other side. That is what my force field looked like. So anytime that I was afraid, and I can do it even now today, I close my eyes, I think about the entity, and it's there. And when I was a kid, especially when my parents got divorced, I call on it often. And again, it never actually did anything to physically protect me, but it showed me how to protect myself, and it helped me to feel safe again. And it was there with me, and it just created the most loving, benevolent presence, even to this day, that I can even think of to explain. It was akin to your mother holding you in her arms, rocking you as a child. Or if you don't have those kind of memories, just the most love that you can imagine. Now, I'm sure that there's an argument that it was an imaginary friend, like I said. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I can tell you to this day, I can still see it if I want to. So after that experience, there's still a lot that I don't remember. And I know at the time, with what was going on in my life, that I suppressed a lot of the things that I was experiencing. I suppressed it out of fear. I suppressed it out of loneliness, isolation. I was told that it was my imagination, that I had an active imagination, that it wasn't real, or that it was a dream, or different things. So I started to just suppress it and block it out. I was scared and I was alone and there wasn't anyone I could talk to about it, and so I just stopped. And it stayed that way for a long time, many years, probably at least 10 years, if not a little bit more. Then my mom and my brother died. I would love to tell you that my mom came to me or my brother came to me and it reawoke all of this inside of me, but that was not the case. What it did do is it started my thirst for knowledge. I wanted to know, were they really still somewhere, like religion told me? What did I actually believe in my heart? Is there even a God? My thoughts and beliefs with religion are very conflicted. There's a lot of pain, judgment, persecution associated with religion, but it's also the core foundation of what I was raised in. There was a lot of fear of, what if I'm wrong? Is it worth my soul being damned to hell forever? Is it worth looking into another possibility? So when my mom and my brother died, I didn't make a conscious decision right then and there to start looking for the supernatural or looking into it or any of that. I didn't even particularly have an interest in supernatural shows or movies. But it started something. It started a desire that was stronger than the fear to start asking questions and looking. Grief was so much stronger than fear. And for that, if that's the only lesson, which it's not, that I gained, that alone, I'm grateful for the grief, to break through the chains of fear. So as I said, this is a long story. This will go ahead and just be part one. We're already like over 15 minutes in. So please come back on Monday and I will tell you more of my story. And believe me, it's just starting to get good. I hope you'll have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.